Chapter 16 of The Royal Book of Oz by Ruth Plumly Thompson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 16. Dorothy and her guardians meet new friends. While all these exciting things were happening to the poor Scarecrow, Dorothy, Sir Hokus, and the Cowardly Lion had been having adventures of their own. For 3 days they had wandered through a deserted part of the Winkie country, subsisting largely on berries, sleeping under trees, and looking in vain for a road to lead them back to the Emerald City. On the second day they had encountered an ancient woodsman, too old and deaf to give them any information. He did, however, invite them into his hut and gave them a good dinner and a dozen sandwiches to carry away with them. "But oh, for a good old pasty!" sighed Sir Hokus late on the third afternoon, as they finished the last of the crumbly sandwiches. "Do you know," said Dorothy, looking through the straggly fields and woods ahead, "I believe we've been going in the wrong direction again."
"Again?" choked the Cowardly Lion. "You mean still? I've been in a good many parts of Oz, but this is the worst." "Not even one little dragon." Sir Hokus shook his head mournfully. Then, seeing that Dorothy was tired and discouraged, he pretended to strum on a guitar, and sang in his high-pitched voice. "A rusty knight in steel betide, a lady dot so fair, Sir Lion bold with mane of gold, and might besides to spare, and might beside to spare. The dauntless three a company of wit and bravery are, who seek the valiant Scarecrow man, who seek him near and far, who seek him near and far."
"Oh, I like that!" cried Dorothy, jumping up and giving Sir Hokus a little squeeze. "Only you should have said trusty knight." The Cowardly Lion shook his golden mane.
"Let's do a little reconnoitering, Hokus,"
he said carelessly. He felt he must live up to the song somehow.
"Perhaps we'll find a sign."
"I don't believe in signs any more," laughed Dorothy, "but I'm coming too." Sir Hokus's song had cheered them all, and it wasn't the first time the Knight had helped make the best of a tiresome journey. "The air seemeth to grow very hot," observed Sir Hokus, after they had walked along silently for a time. "Hast noticed it, Sir Cowardly?"
"No, but I've swallowed some of it," coughed the Cowardly Lion, looking suspiciously through the trees. "I'll just step forward and see what it is," said the Knight. As he disappeared, the truth dawned on Dorothy. "Wait! Wait! Don't go! Please! Please, Sir Hokus, come back! Come back!" cried the little girl, running after him as fast as she could. "What's the matter?"
rumbled the Cowardly Lion, thudding behind her. Then both, coming suddenly out of the woods, gave a terrible scream which so startled Sir Hokus that he fell over backwards. Just in time, too, for another step would have taken him straight on to the deadly desert, which destroys every living thing and keeps all intruders away from Oz.
"What befell?"
puffed Sir Hokus, getting to his feet. Naturally, he knew nothing of the poisonous sands.
"You did,"
wheezed the Cowardly Lion in an agitated voice.
"Was it a dragon?"
asked the Knight, limping toward them hopefully.
"Sit down."
The Cowardly Lion mopped his brow with his tail.
"One step on that desert, and it would have been one long good night."
"I should say it would," shuddered Dorothy, and explained to Sir Hokus the deadly nature of the sands. "And do you know what this means?" Dorothy was nearer to tears than even I like to think about. "It means we've come in exactly the wrong direction and are farther away from the Emerald City than we were when we started."
"And seek him near and far,"
mumbled Sir Hokus, with a very troubled light in his kindly blue eyes.
"And seek him near and far. Far, I should say it was,"
said the Cowardly Lion bitterly. "But you needn't sing it."
"No, I suppose not. Odds helmets and halberts, I suppose not."
The knight lapsed into a discouraged silence, and all three sat and stared drearily at the stretch of desert before them, and thought gloomily of the rough country behind.
"It's a caravan,"
wheezed a hoarse voice. "I doubt that, Cammy. I doubt it very much." The shrill nasal voices so startled the three travelers that they swung about in astonishment.
"Great gates and deserts!"
burst out the Cowardly Lion, jumping up, and on the whole this exclamation was entirely suitable, for ambling toward them were a long-legged camel and a wobbly-necked dromedary.
"At last, a steed!"
cried the knight, bounding to his feet. "I doubt that." The dromedary stopped and looked at him coldly. "Try me," said the camel amiably. "I'm more comfortable." "I doubt that, too."
"The doubtful dromedary wept, and o'er the desert sands he stepped. Association with the Sphinx has made him doubtful, so he thinks,"
chortled the knight with his head on one side. "How did you know?" asked the dromedary, opening his eyes wide.
"It just occurred to me,"
admitted Sir Hokus, clearing his throat modestly. "I doubt that. Somebody told you," said the doubtful dromedary bitterly.
"'Pon my honor,"
said Sir Hokus. "I doubt it. I doubt it very much," persisted the dromedary, wagging his head sorrowfully. "You seem to doubt everything." Dorothy laughed in spite of herself, and the dromedary regarded her sulkily.
"He does," said the camel. "It makes him very doubtful company. Now, I like to be comfortable and happy, and you can't be if you're always doubting things and people and places, eh, my dear?" "Where did you comfortable and doubtful parties come from?" asked the Cowardly Lion. "Strangers here?"
"Well, yes," admitted the camel, nibbling the branch of a tree.
"There was a terrific sandstorm, and after blowing and blowing and blowing,
we finally found ourselves in this little wood. The odd part of it is that you talk in our language. Never knew a two-leg to understand a word of Camellia before." "You're not talking Camellia. You're talking Ozish," laughed Dorothy. "All animals can talk here."
"Well, now that's very comfortable, I must say," sighed the camel.
"And if you'd just tell me where to go, it would be more comfortable still." "I doubt that," snapped the dromedary. "They're no caravan."
"Where do you want to go?"
asked the Cowardly Lion, ignoring the doubtful dromedary.
"Anywhere, just so we keep moving. We're used to being told when to start and stop, and life is mighty lonely without our Karwan Bashi,"
sighed the comfortable camel. "Why, I didn't know you smoked!" exclaimed Dorothy in surprise. She thought the camel was referring to a brand of tobacco. "He means his camel driver," whispered Sir Hokus, eyeing the soft pillowed seat on the camel's back longingly. Beside the seat, great sacks and bales of goods hung from its sides. The doubtful dromedary was similarly loaded. "Goodness!" exclaimed Dorothy. A sudden idea had struck her. "You haven't anything to eat in those sacks, have you?"
"Plenty, my child, plenty,"
answered the camel calmly.
"Three cheers for the comfortable camel,"
roared the Cowardly Lion, while Sir Hokus, following the camel's directions, carefully unfastened a large woven basket from one of the sacks on its side.
"You may be my Karwan Bashi,"
announced the comfortable camel judiciously, as Sir Hokus paused for breath.
"Hear that, Lady Dot?
Sir Hokus swept the camel a bow and fairly beamed with pleasure. Dorothy, meanwhile, had set out an appetizing repast on a small rocky ledge, a regular feast it appeared to the hungry travelers. There were loaves of black bread, figs, dates, cheese, and a curious sort of dried meat which the Cowardly Lion swallowed in great quantities. "Isn't this cozy?" said Dorothy, forgetting the long, weary way ahead. "My, I'm glad we met you." "Very comforting to us too, my dear," said the camel, swaying complacently. "Isn't it, Doughty?"
"There are some silk cushions in my right-hand saddle-sack, but I doubt very much whether you'll like 'em," mumbled the dromedary gruffly.
"Out with them!" cried Sir Hokus, pouncing on the doubtful dromedary, and in a minute each of the party had a cushion and was as snug as possible. "Could anything have been more fortunate?" exulted the knight. "We can now resume our journey properly mounted." "I think I'll ride the Cowardly Lion," said Dorothy, looking uneasily at the high seat on the camel's back. "Let's start before it grows any darker." They had eaten to heart's content, and now, packing up the remainder of the feast, the little party was ready to start. Sir Hokus, using the Cowardly Lion as a footstool, mounted the camel, and then Dorothy climbed on her old friend's back, and the little caravan moved slowly through the forest.
"There's a tent in my left-hand saddle-sack, but I doubt very much whether you can put it up," said the doubtful dromedary, falling in behind the comfortable camel. "I doubt it very much indeed."
"How now? What means this doubting?" called Sir Hokus from his perilous seat. "I'll pitch it when the time comes." "Mind you don't pitch out when the camel goes," called the Cowardly Lion, who would have his little joke. Sir Hokus, to tell the truth, was feeling tossed about and dizzy, but he was too polite to mention the fact. As they proceeded, Dorothy told the comfortable camel all about the Scarecrow and Oz. An occasional word jolted down from above told her that the knight was singing. They had gone possibly a mile when Dorothy pointed in excitement to a road just ahead. "We must have missed it before. Wait, I'll see what it's like." Jumping down from the Cowardly Lion's back, she peered cautiously at the narrow, tree-lined path. "Why, here's a sign!" "What of?" asked the Comfortable Camel, lurching forward eagerly and nearly unseating the knight. "Wish Way," read Dorothy in a puzzled voice. "Looks like a pretty good road," said the Comfortable Camel, squinting up its eyes.
"I doubt it, Cammy, I doubt it very much," said the doubtful dromedary tremulously.
"What does my dear Karwan Bashi think?" asked the Comfortable Camel, looking adoringly back at the knight. "It is unwise to go back when the journey lieth forward," said the knight, and immediately returned to his song. So, single file, the little company turned in at the narrow path, the Comfortable Camel advancing with timid steps, and the doubtful dromedary bobbing his head dubiously. End of chapter 16. Chapter 17 of the Royal Book of Oz by Ruth Plumly Thompson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 17, Doughty and Cammy Vanish into Space. For a short time, everything went well. Then Dorothy, turning to see how Sir Hokus was getting along, discovered that the doubtful dromedary had disappeared. "Why, where in the world?" exclaimed Dorothy. The Comfortable Camel craned his wobbly neck and, when he saw that his friend was gone, burst into tears. His sobs heaved Sir Hokus clear out of his seat and flung him, helmet first, into the dust.
"Oh, too!" exploded the knight, sitting up. "If I were a bird, riding in yon nest would be easier."
The last of his sentence ended in a hoarse croak. Sir Hokus vanished, and a great raven flopped down in the center of the road.
"Oh, where is my dear Karwanbashi? Oh, where is Doughty?" screamed the Comfortable Camel, running around in frenzied circles. "I wish I'd never come on this path."
"Magic!" gasped Dorothy, clutching the Cowardly Lion's mane. The Comfortable Camel had melted into air before their very eyes. "I doubt it! I doubt it very much!" coughed a faint voice close to her ear. Dorothy ducked her head involuntarily as a big yellow butterfly settled on the Cowardly Lion's ear.
"Our doubtful friend," whispered the Lion weakly. "Oh, do be careful, Dorothy dear. We may turn into frogs or something worse any minute."
Dorothy and the Cowardly Lion had had experience with magic transformations, and the little girl, pressing her fingers to her eyes, tried to think of something to do. The raven was making awkward attempts to fly and cawing, "Go to, now!" every other second. "Oh, I wish dear Sir Hokus were himself again," wailed Dorothy after trying in vain to recall some magic sentences. Presto! The knight stood before them, a bit breathless from flying, but hearty as ever.
I see," said the Cowardly Lion with a little prance. "Every wish you make on this road comes true. Remember the sign, Wish Way. I wish the Comfortable Camel were back. I wish the Doubtful Dromedary were himself again," muttered the Cowardly Lion rapidly, and in an instant the two creatures were standing in the path. "Odds bodkins, so I did wish myself a bird," gasped the knight, rubbing his gauntlets together excitedly.
There you are, cried the Comfortable Camel, stumbling toward him and resting his foolish head on his shoulder.
"Dear, dear Karwanbashi. And Doughty, old fellow, there you are too. Ah, how comfortable this all is."
Not two, one, wheezed the Doubtful Dromedary. And Cammy, I doubt very much whether I'd care for butterflying. I just happened to wish myself one.
"Don't make any more wishes,"
said the Cowardly Lion sternly. "Methinks a proper wish might serve us well," observed Sir Hokus. He had been pacing up and down in great excitement. "Why not wish—" "Oh, stop!" begged Dorothy. "Wait till we've thought it all out. Wishing's awfully particular work."
"One person better speak for the party," said the Cowardly Lion. "Now, I suggest—"
"Oh, be careful!" screamed Dorothy again. "I wish you would all stop wishing." Sir Hokus looked at her reproachfully. No wonder. At Dorothy's words they all found themselves unable to speak. The Doubtful Dromedary's eyes grew rounder and rounder. For the first time in its life it was unable to doubt anything. "Now I'll have to do it all," thought Dorothy, and closing her eyes, she tried to think of the very best wish for everybody concerned. It was night and growing darker. The Cowardly Lion, the Camel and Dromedary, and Sir Hokus peered anxiously at the little girl, wondering what in the world was going to happen. Being wished around is no joke. For 5 minutes Dorothy thought and thought. Then, standing in the middle of the road, she made her wish in a clear, distinct voice. It was not a very long wish. To be exact, it had only 8 words. 8 short, little words. But stars! No sooner were they out of Dorothy's mouth
Then the earth opened with a splintering crash and swallowed up the whole company. End of chapter 17. Chapter 18 of the Royal Book of Oz by Ruth Plumly Thompson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 18. Dorothy Finds the Scarecrow. The next thing Dorothy knew, she was sitting on the hard floor of a great dark hall. One lantern burned feebly, and in the dim, silvery light she could just make out the Comfortable Camel scrambling awkwardly to his feet. "I smell straw," sniffed the Camel softly. "I doubt very much whether I'm going to like this place." The voice of the Doubtful Dromedary came hesitantly through the gloom. "By sword and scepter!" gasped the Knight. "Are you there, Sir Cowardly?" "Thank goodness they are," said Dorothy. "Wishing other people about is a risky and responsible business. They're all here, but I wonder where here is." She jumped up, but at a shuffle of feet drew back. "Pigs! Weasels!" shrilled an angry voice, and a fat little man hurled himself at Sir Hokus, who happened to have fallen in the lead. "Odds trudgeons and bludgeons and maugre thy head!" roared the Knight, shaking him off like a fly. "Tappy, Tappy, my dear boy, caution! What's all this?" At the sound of that dear familiar voice, Dorothy's heart gave a skip of joy, and without stopping to explain, she rushed forward. "Dorothy!" cried the Scarecrow, stepping on his kimono and falling off his silvery throne. "Lights, Tappy! More lights at once!" But Tappy was too busy backing away from Sir Hokus of Pokes. "Approach, vassal!" thundered the Knight, who understood not a word of Tappy's speech. "Approach! I think I have been insulted." He drew his sword and glared angrily through the darkness, and Tappy, having backed as far as possible, fell heels over pigtail into the silver fountain. At the loud splash, Dorothy hastened to the rescue. "They're friends, and we've found the Scarecrow! We've found the Scarecrow!" She seized Sir Hokus and shook him till his armor rattled. "Tappy, Tappy!" called the Scarecrow. "Where in the world did he pagoda?" That's exactly what he said, but to Dorothy it sounded like no language at all. "Why," she cried in dismay, "it's the Scarecrow, but I can't understand a word he's saying." "I think he must be talking turkey," droned the Comfortable Camel. "Or donkey. I knew a donkey once. A very uncomfortable party. I doubt it's donkey," put in the Dromedary importantly, but no one paid any attention to the two beasts, for Happy Toko had at last dragged himself out of the fountain and set 15 lanterns glowing. "Oh!" gasped Dorothy, as the magnificent silver throne room was flooded with light. "Where are we?" The Scarecrow had picked himself up, and with outstretched arms came running toward her, talking a perfect Niagara of Silver Islandish. "Have you forgotten your Ozish so soon?" rumbled the Cowardly Lion reproachfully, as Dorothy flung her arms around the Scarecrow. The Scarecrow, seeing the Cowardly Lion for the first time, fairly fell upon his neck. Then he brushed his clumsy hand across his forehead. "Wasn't I talking Ozish?" he asked in a puzzled voice. "Oh, now you are!" exclaimed Dorothy. And sure enough, the Scarecrow was talking plain Ozish now, which I don't mind telling you is also plain English. The Knight had been watching this little reunion with hardly repressed emotion. Advancing hastily, he dropped on one knee. "My good sword and lance are ever at thy service, my Lord Scarecrow," he exclaimed feelingly. "Who is this impulsive person?" gulped the Scarecrow,
staring in undisguised astonishment at the kneeling figure of Sir Hokus of Pokes. "He's my knight errant, and he's taken such good care of me," explained Dorothy eagerly.
"Splendid fellow,"
hissed the Cowardly Lion in the Scarecrow's other painted ear, "if he does talk odds and ends." "Any friend of little Dorothy's is my friend," said the Scarecrow, shaking hands with Sir Hokus warmly. "And what I want to know is how you all got here." "First tell us where we are," begged the little girl, for the Scarecrow's silver hat and queue filled her with alarm. "You are on the Silver Island," said the Scarecrow slowly, "and I am the Emperor, or his good-for-nothing spirit. And tomorrow," the Scarecrow glared around wildly, "tomorrow I'll be 85 going on 86." His voice broke and ended in a barely controlled sob. "Doubt that," drawled the Doubtful Dromedary sleepily. 85 years old?" gasped Dorothy. "Why, no one in Oz grows any older." "We are no longer in Oz." The Scarecrow shook his head sadly. Then, fixing the group with a puzzled stare, he exclaimed, "But how did you get here?" "On a wish," said the Knight in a hollow voice. "Yes," said Dorothy, "we've been hunting you all over Oz, and at last we came to Wishway, and I said, 'I wish we were all with the Scarecrow,' just like that, and next minute—" "We fell and fell and fell and fell," wheezed the Comfortable Camel. "And fell and fell and fell and fell," droned the Dromedary, "and—" "Here you are," finished the Scarecrow hastily, for the Dromedary showed signs of going on forever. "Now tell us every single thing that has happened to you," demanded Dorothy eagerly. Happy Toko had recognized Dorothy and the Cowardly Lion from the Scarecrow's descriptions, and he now approached with an arm full of cushions. These he set in a circle on the floor, with one for the Scarecrow in the center, and with a warning finger on his lips placed himself behind his master. "Tappy is right," exclaimed the Scarecrow. "We must be as quiet as possible, for a great danger hangs over me." Without more ado, he told them of his amazing fall down the beanstalk, of his adventures on the Silver Island, of his sons and grandsons, and the Gee-Wizard's elixir, which would turn him from a lively Scarecrow into an old Emperor. All that I have told you, he told Dorothy, up to the very point where his eldest son had bound him to the beanpole and tied up poor faithful Happy Toko. Happy, it seems, had at last managed to free himself, and they were about to make their escape when Dorothy and her party had fallen into the throne room. The Comfortable Camel and Doubtful Dromedary listened politely at first, but worn out by their exciting adventures, fell asleep in the middle of the story. Nothing could have exceeded Dorothy's dismay to learn that the jolly Scarecrow of Oz, whom she had discovered herself, was in reality Chang Wang Woe, Emperor of Silver Island. "Oh, this spoils everything," wailed the little girl. The thought of Oz without the Scarecrow was unthinkable. "It spoils everything. We were going to adopt you and be your truly family, weren't we?" The Cowardly Lion nodded.
"I was going to be your cousin,"
he mumbled in a choked voice,
"but now that you have a family of your own—"
The Lion miserably slunk down beside Dorothy. Sir Hokus looked fierce and rattled his sword, but he could think of nothing that would help them out of their trouble. "Tomorrow there won't be any Scarecrow in Oz," wailed Dorothy. "Oh, dear! Oh, dear!" And the little girl began to cry as if her heart would break. "Stop! Stop!" begged the Scarecrow, while Sir Hokus awkwardly patted Dorothy on the back. "I'd rather have you for my family any day. I don't care a kinkajou for being Emperor. And as for my sons, they are unnatural villains who make my life miserable by telling me how old I am." "Just like a poem I once read," said Dorothy, brightening up. "You are old, Father William," the young man said, "and your hair has become very white, and yet you incessantly stand on your head. Do you think at your age it is right?" That's it exactly," exclaimed the Scarecrow as Dorothy finished repeating the verse. "You are old, Father Scarecrow, that's all I hear. I did stand on my head, too. And, Dorothy, I can't seem to get used to being a grandparent," added the Scarecrow in a melancholy voice. "It's turning my straws gray." He plucked several from his chest and held them out to her. "Why, those little villains don't even believe in Oz. It's not on the map, old Grandpapa, he mumbled, imitating the tones of his little grandson so cleverly that Dorothy laughed in spite of herself. "This is what becomes of pride." The Scarecrow extended his hands expressively. "Most people who hunt up their family trees are in for a fall, and I've had mine." "But who do you want to be?" asked the Knight gravely. "A scarecrow in Oz, or the Emperor that you were?" "I don't care who I were." In his excitement, the Scarecrow lost his grammar completely. "I want to be who I am. I want to be myself." "But which one?" asked the Cowardly Lion, who was still a bit confused. "Why, my best self, of course," said the Scarecrow with a bright smile. The sight of his old friends had quite restored his cheerfulness. "I've been here long enough to know that I am a better Scarecrow than an Emperor." "Why, how simple it is!" sighed Dorothy contentedly. "Professor Wogglebug was all wrong. It's not who you were, but what you are. It's being yourself that counts." "By my halidome, the little maid is right," said Sir Hokus, slapping his knee in delight. "Let your G-Wizard but try his transformations. Out on him! But what say yon honest henchman?" Happy Toko, although he understood no word of the conversation, had been watching the discussion with great interest. He had been trying to attract the Scarecrow's attention for some time, but the Knight was the only one who had noticed him. "What is it, Tappy?" asked the Scarecrow, dropping easily back into Silver Islandish. "Honored Master, the dawn approaches, and with it the royal princes and the Grand G-Wizard. And your bride." Happy paused significantly. The Scarecrow shuddered. "Let's go back to Oz," said the Cowardly Lion uneasily. The Scarecrow was feeling in the pocket of his old Munchkin suit, which he always wore under his robes of state. "Here," said he, giving a little pill to Happy Toko. "It's one of Professor Wogglebug's language pills," he exclaimed to Dorothy, "and will enable him to speak and understand Ozish." Happy swallowed the pill gravely. "Greetings, honorable Ozites," he said politely as soon as the pill was down. Dorothy clapped her hands in delight, for it was so comfortable to have him speak their own language. "I could never have stood it here without Tapioko." The Scarecrow looked fondly at his Imperial Punster. "Queer name he has," rumbled the Cowardly Lion, looking at Happy Toko as if he had thoughts of eating him. "Methinks he should be knighted," rumbled Sir Hokus, beaming on the little Silverman. "Rise, Sir Pudding." "The sun will do that in a minute or more, and then we shall all be thrown into prison," wailed Happy Toko dismally. "We were going to escape in a small boat," explained the Scarecrow, "but—" It was not necessary for him to finish. A boat large enough to hold Dorothy, the Cowardly Lion, the Scarecrow, Happy Toko, the Camel, and the Dromedary could not very well be launched in secret. "Oh, dear," sighed Dorothy, "if I'd only wished you and all of us back in the Emerald City."
You wished very well, Lady Dot, said the knight. When I think what I was going to wish for. What were you going to wish, Hocus? Asked the Cowardly Lion curiously. For a dragon, faltered the knight, looking terribly ashamed.
A dragon? Gasped Dorothy. Why, what good would that have done us? Wait, interrupted the Scarecrow. I have thought of something. Why not climb my family tree? It's a long, long way up, but at the top lies Oz.
Gramercy, a pretty plan,
exclaimed Sir Hokus, peering up at the beanpole. Wouldn't that be social climbing? Chuckled Happy Toko, recovering his spirits with a bound. The Cowardly Lion said nothing, but heaved a mighty sigh which no one heard, for they were all running toward the beanpole. It was a good family tree to climb, sure enough, for there were handy little notches in the stalk.
You go first,
Sir Hokus helped Dorothy up. When she had gone a few steps, the Scarecrow, holding his robes carefully, followed, then honest Happy Toko.
I'll go last,
said Sir Hokus bravely, and had just set his foot on the first notch when a hoarse scream rang through the hall. End of Chapter 18. Chapter 19 of the Royal Book of Oz by Ruth Plumly Thompson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 19. Planning to Fly from the Silver Island. It was the Comfortable Camel. Waking suddenly, he found himself deserted.
"Oh, where is my dear Karwan Bashi?"
he roared dismally.
"Come back! Come back!"
"Hush up, can't you?" rumbled the Cowardly Lion. "Do you want Dorothy and everybody to be thrown into prison on our account? We can't climb the beanpole, and we'll have to wait here and face it out."
"But how uncomfortable!"
wailed the Camel. He began to sob heavily. Dorothy, although highest up the beanpole, heard all this distinctly. "Oh!" she cried remorsefully. "We can't desert the Cowardly Lion like this. I never thought about him."
"Spoken like the dear little maid you are," said the knight. "The good beast never reminded us of it either. There's bravery for you. Let us descend at once. I'll not move a step without the Cowardly Lion."
In his agitation, the Scarecrow lost his balance and fell headlong to the ground, knocking Sir Hokus's helmet terribly askew as he passed. The others made haste to follow him and were soon gathered gravely at the foot of the beanstalk. "I'll have to think of some other plan," said the Scarecrow, looking nervously at the sky, which showed through the long windows the first streaks of dawn. The Comfortable Camel controlled its sobs with difficulty and pressed as close to Sir Hokus as it could. The Doubtful Dromedary was still asleep. It would have been a terrible climb, mused the Scarecrow, thinking of his long, long fall down the pole. "Ah, I have it!" "What?" asked Dorothy anxiously. "I wonder I did not think of it before. Ah, my brains are working better. I will abdicate!" exclaimed the Scarecrow triumphantly. "I will abdicate, make a farewell speech, and return with you to Oz." "What if they refuse to let your Radiant Highness go?" put in Happy Toko tremulously. "What if the G-Wizard should work his magic before you finished your speech?"
"Then we'll make a dash for it,"
said Sir Hokus, twirling his sword recklessly.
"I'm with you,"
said the Cowardly Lion huskily, "but you needn't have come back for me." "All right," said the Scarecrow cheerfully. "And now that everything's settled so nicely, we might as well enjoy the little time left. Put out the lights, Tappy. Dorothy and I will sit on the throne, and the rest of you come as close as possible." Sir Hokus wakened the doubtful dromedary and pulled and tugged it across the hall, where it immediately fell down asleep again. The comfortable camel ambled about eating the flowers out of the vases. The Cowardly Lion had placed himself at Dorothy's feet, and Sir Hokus and Happy Toko seated themselves upon the first step of the gorgeous silver throne. Then, while they waited for morning, Dorothy told the Scarecrow all about the Pokes and Fix City, and the Scarecrow told once again of his victory over the King of the Golden Islands. "Where is the magic fan now?" asked Dorothy at the end of the story. The Scarecrow smiled broadly, and, feeling in a deep pocket, brought out the little fan and also the parasol he had plucked from the beanstalk. "Do you know," he said, smiling, "so much has happened I haven't thought of them since the battle. I was saving them for you, Dorothy." "For me!" exclaimed the little girl in delight. "Let me see them." The Scarecrow handed them over obligingly, but Happy Toko trembled so violently that he rolled down the steps of the throne. "I beg of you," he scrambled to his feet and held up his hands in terror, "I beg of you, don't open that fan." "She's used to magic, Tappy. You needn't worry," said the Scarecrow easily. "Of course I am," said Dorothy with great dignity. "But this'll be mighty useful if anyone tries to conquer Oz again. We can just fan 'em away." Dorothy pulled a hair from the Cowardly Lion's mane, and winding it around the little fan, put it carefully in the pocket of her dress. The parasol she hung by its ribbon to her arm. "Perhaps Ozma will look in the Magic Picture and wish us all back again," said the little girl after they had sat for a time in silence. "I doubt it." The dromedary stirred and mumbled in its sleep. "Singular beast, that!" ejaculated the Knight. "Doubting never gets one anywhere." "Hush!" warned the Scarecrow. "I hear footsteps." "Come here," Sir Hokus called hoarsely to the camel, who was eating a paper lantern at the other end of the room. The beast ran awkwardly over to the throne and, swallowing the lantern with a convulsive gulp, settled down beside the dromedary. "Whatever happens, we must stick together," said the Knight emphatically. "Ah!" Dorothy held fast to the Scarecrow with one hand and to the throne with the other. The sun had risen at last. There was a loud crash of drums and trumpets, a rush of feet, and into the hall marched the most splendid company Dorothy had seen in her whole life of adventures. End of Chapter 19. Chapter 20 of The Royal Book of Oz by Ruth Plumly Thompson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 20. Dorothy Upsets the Ceremony of the Island. "A caravan," whistled the Comfortable Camel, lurching to his feet. "How nice!" "I doubt that." The dromedary's eyes flew open, and he stared sleepily at the magnificent procession of Silver Islanders. First came the musicians, playing their shining silver trumpets and flutes. The Grand Choo-Choo and General Mugwump followed, attired in brilliant silk robes of state. Then came the three princes, glittering with jeweled chains and medals, and the 15 little princes, like so many silver butterflies in their satin kimonos. Next appeared a palanquin bearing the veiled Princess Orange Blossom, followed by a whole company of splendid courtiers, and after them as many of the everyday Silver Islanders as the hall would hold. There was a moment of silence. Then the whole assemblage, contrary to the Scarecrow's edict, fell upon their faces. "My!" exclaimed Dorothy, impressed in spite of herself. "Are you sure you want to give up all this?"
Great Emperor, beautiful as the sun, wise as the stars, and radiant as the clouds, the ceremony of restoration is about to begin," quavered the Grand Choo-Choo, rising slowly. Then he paused, for he was suddenly confused by the strange company around the Scarecrow's throne. "Treachery!" hissed the eldest prince to the others. "We left him tied to the beanpole. Ancient Papa Scarecrow needs watching. Who are these curious objects he has gathered about him, pray?" Now, by some magic which even I cannot explain, the people from Oz found they could understand all that was being said. When Dorothy heard herself called an object and saw the wicked faces of the three princes and the stupid little grandsons, she no longer wondered at the Scarecrow's decision. The Scarecrow himself bowed calmly. "First," said he cheerfully, "let me introduce my friends and visitors from Oz." The Silver Islanders, who really loved the Scarecrow, bowed politely as he called out the names of Dorothy and the others. But the three Silver Princes scowled and whispered indignantly among themselves. "I am growing very wroth," choked Sir Hokus to the Cowardly Lion. "Let the ceremony proceed," called the eldest prince harshly, before the Scarecrow had finished his introductions. "Let the proper body of His Serene Highness be immediately restored. Way for the Grand G-Wizard! Way for the Grand G-Wizard!" "One moment," put in the Scarecrow in a dignified voice. "I have something to say." The Silver Islanders clapped loudly at this, and Dorothy felt a bit reassured. Perhaps they would listen to reason after all and let the Scarecrow depart peacefully. How they were ever going to escape if they didn't, the little girl could not see. "My dear children," began the Scarecrow in his jolly voice, "nothing could have been more wonderful than my return to this lovely island. But in the years I have been away from you, I have changed very much, and I find I no longer care for being Emperor. So, with your kind permission, I will keep the excellent body I now have and will abdicate in favor of my eldest son and return with my friends to Oz, for in Oz I really belong." A dead silence followed the Scarecrow's speech, then perfect pandemonium. "No, no, you are a good Emperor! We will not let you go!" shrieked the people. "You are our honorable little father. The Prince shall be Emperor after you have peacefully returned to your ancestors, but not now. No, no, we will not have it." "I feared this," quavered Happy Toko. "It is not the Emperor, but the Scarecrow who speaks," shrilled the Grand Choo-Choo craftily. "He knows not what he says. But after the transformation, you shall see." The company calmed down at this. "Let the ceremony begin. Way for the Grand G-Wizard!" they cried exultantly. "Choo-Choo!" wailed the Scarecrow. "You're off the track!" But it was too late. No one would listen. "I'll have to think of something else," muttered the Scarecrow, sinking dejectedly back on his throne. "Oh!" shuddered Dorothy, clutching the Scarecrow. "Here he comes!" "Way for the Grand G-Wizard! Way for the Grand G-Wizard!" The crowd parted. Hobbling toward the throne came the ugly little G-Wizard of the Silver Island, holding a large silver vase high above his head, and after him— When Sir Hokus caught a glimpse of what came after, he leaped clean over the Comfortable Camel. "Ugs! Daggers!" roared the knight. "At last!" He rushed forward violently. There was a sharp thrust of his good sword, then an explosion like 20 giant firecrackers in one, and the room became quite black with smoke.
Before anyone realized what had happened, Sir Hokus was back, dragging something after him and shouting exuberantly, "A dragon! I have slain a dragon! What happiness!" Everyone was coughing and spluttering from the smoke, but as it cleared, Dorothy saw that it was indeed a dragon Sir Hokus had slain, the rheumatic dragon of the old Wizard himself.
"Why didn't you get the wizard?"
rumbled the Cowardly Lion angrily.
"Must have exploded," said the Comfortable Camel, sniffing the skin daintily.
"Treason!" yelled the three princes, while the Grand Wizard flung himself on the stone floor and began tearing strand after strand from his silver pigtail.
"He has killed the little joy of my hearth,"
screeched the old man.
"I will turn him to a cat, a miserable yellow cat, and roast him for dinner."
"Oh!" cried Dorothy, looking at Sir Hokus sorrowfully. "How could you?" The slaying of the dragon had thrown the whole hall into utmost confusion. Sir Hokus turned a little pale under his armor, but faced the angry crowd without flinching.
"Oh, my dear Karwan Bashi, this is so uncomfortable," wheezed the camel, glancing back of him with frightened eyes.
"There's a shiny dagger in my left-hand saddle-sack. I doubt very much whether you would like it," coughed the Doubtful Dromedary, pressing close to the knight. "On with the ceremony!" cried the eldest prince, seeing that the excitement was giving the Scarecrow's friends too much time to think. "The son of an iron pot shall be punished later."
"That's right!" cried a voice from the crowd. "Let the Emperor be restored." "I guess it's all over," gulped the Scarecrow. "Give my love to Ozma and tell her I tried to come back." In helpless terror, the little company watched the Wizard approach. One could fight real enemies, but magic! Even Sir Hokus, brave as he was, felt that nothing could be done.
"One move, and you shall be so many prunes," shrilled the angry old man, fixing the people from Oz with his wicked little eyes. The great room was so still you could have heard a pin drop. Even the Doubtful Dromedary had not the heart to doubt the Wizard's power, but stood rigid as a statue. The Wizard advanced slowly, holding the sealed vase carefully over his head. The poor Scarecrow regarded it with gloomy fascination. One more moment and he would be an old, old silver man. Better to be lost forever. He held convulsively to Dorothy. As for Dorothy herself, she was trembling with fright and grief. When the Grand Wizard raised the vase higher and higher and made ready to hurl it at the Scarecrow, disregarding his dire threat, she gave a shrill scream and threw up both hands. "Great-grandmothers!" gasped the Scarecrow, jumping to his feet. As Dorothy had thrown up her arms, the little parasol swinging at her wrist had jerked open. Up, 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 and out through the broken skylight in the roof sailed the little Princess of Oz. The Grand Wizard, startled as anyone, failed to throw the vase. Every neck was craned upward, and everyone was gasping with astonishment. The oldest Prince, as usual, was the first to recover. "Don't stand there staring like an idiot. Now's your chance," he hissed angrily at the Wizard's ear.
"I didn't come here to be harried and hurried by foreigners,"
sobbed the little man.
"How is one to work magic when interrupted every other minute? I want my little dragon."
"Oh, come on now, just throw it. I'll get you another dragon," begged the Prince, his hands trembling with excitement. In the face of this new disaster,
The Scarecrow had forgotten all about the G-Wizard. He and the Cowardly Lion and Sir Hokus were running distractedly around the great throne, trying to think up a way to rescue Dorothy. As for the Doubtful Dromedary, he was doubting everything in a loud, bitter voice, while the Comfortable Camel fairly snorted with sorrow. "There, now's your chance," whispered the Prince. The Scarecrow, with his back to the crowd, was gesturing frantically. Taking a firm hold on the neck of the vase, and with a long incantation which there is no use at all in repeating, the G-Wizard flung the bottle straight at the Scarecrow's head. But scarcely had it left his hand before there was a flash and a flutter, and down came Dorothy and the magic parasol right on top of the vase. Zip! The vase flew in quite another direction, and next minute had burst over the luckless heads of the three plotting princes, while Dorothy floated gently to earth. Sir Hokus embraced the Scarecrow, and the Scarecrow hugged the Cowardly Lion, and I don't wonder at all. For no sooner had the magic elixir touched the princes than two of them became silver pigs, and the eldest a weasel. They had been turned to their true shapes instead of the Scarecrow. And while the company hopped about in alarm, they ran squealing from the hall and disappeared in the gardens. "Seize the G-Wizard and take him to his cave," ordered the Scarecrow, asserting his authority for the first time since the proceedings had started. He had noticed the old man making queer signs and passes toward Sir Hokus. A dozen took hold of the struggling G-Wizard and hurried him out of the hall. Sir Hokus, at the request of the Scarecrow, clapped his iron gauntlets for silence. "You will agree with me, I'm sure," said the Scarecrow in a slightly unsteady voice, "that magic is a serious matter to meddle with. If you will all return quietly to your homes, I will try to find a way out of our difficulties." The Silver Islanders listened respectfully, and after a little arguing among themselves, backed out of the throne room. To tell the truth, they were anxious to spread abroad the tale of the morning's happenings. Princess Orange Blossom, however, refused to depart. Magic or no magic, she had come to marry the Emperor, and she would not leave till the ceremony had been performed. "But, my dear old lady, would you wish to marry a Scarecrow?" coaxed the Emperor. "All men are scarecrows," snapped the Princess sourly. "Then why marry at all?" rumbled the Cowardly Lion, making a playful leap at her palanquin. This was too much. The Princess swooned on the spot, and the Scarecrow, taking advantage of her unconscious condition, ordered her chair bearers to carry her away as far and as fast as they could run. "Now," said the Scarecrow, when the last of the company had disappeared, "let us talk this over." End of Chapter 20. Chapter 21 of the Royal Book of Oz by Ruth Plumly Thompson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 21. The Escape from the Silver Island. "Well," gasped Dorothy, fanning herself with her hat, "I never was so surprised in my life." "Nor I," exclaimed the Scarecrow. "The Grand G-Wizard will be suing you for parassault and battery. But how did it happen?" "Well," began Dorothy, "as soon as the parasol opened, I flew up so fast that I could hardly breathe. Then, after I'd gone ever so far, it came to me that if the parasol went up when it was up, it would come down when it was down. I couldn't leave you all in such a fix, so I closed it and—" "Came down," finished the Scarecrow with a wave of his hand. "You always do the right thing in the right place, my dear." "I was lucky I hit the vase, wasn't I?" sighed Dorothy. "But I'm rather sorry about the princes." "Served 'em right," growled the Cowardly Lion. "They'll make very good pigs." "But who's to rule the island?" demanded Sir Hokus, turning his gaze reluctantly from the smoking dragon skin. "This will require thought," said the Scarecrow pensively. "Let us all think." "I doubt that I can ever think again." The Doubtful Dromedary wagged his head from side to side in a dazed fashion. "Just leave it to our dear Karwan Bashi." The Comfortable Camel nodded complacently at the Knight and began plucking sly wisps from the Scarecrow's boot top. For a short time there was absolute silence. Then Sir Hokus, who had been thinking tremendously with his elbows on his knees, burst out, "Why not Sir Pudding here? Why not this honest punster? Who but Happy Toko deserves the throne?" "The very person!" cried the Scarecrow, clasping his yellow gloves and taking off his silver hat. He set it impulsively upon the head of the fat little Silver Islander. "He'll make a lovely Emperor," said Dorothy. "He's so kind-hearted and jolly, and now the Scarecrow can abdicate and come home to Oz." They all looked triumphantly at the Imperial Punster, but Happy Toko, snatching off the royal hat, burst into tears. "Don't leave me behind, amiable master," he sobbed disconsolately. "Oh, how I shall miss you!" "But don't you see?" coaxed Dorothy. "The Scarecrow needs you here more than any place. And think of all the fine clothes you will have, and how rich you will be." "And, Tappy, my dear boy," said the Scarecrow, putting his arm around Happy Toko, "you might not like Oz any more than I like Silver Island. Then think, if everything goes well, you can visit me, just as one Emperor visits another." "And you won't forget me?" sniffed Happy, beginning to like the idea of being Emperor. "Never!" cried the Scarecrow with an impressive wave. "And if anything goes wrong, will you help me out?" questioned Happy uncertainly. "We'll look in the Magic Picture of Oz every month," declared Dorothy. "And if you need us, we'll surely find some way to help you." "And if you ever require a trusty sword, odds bodkins," exclaimed Sir Hokus, pressing Tappy's hand, "I'm your man." "All right, dear master." Happy slowly picked up the Imperial hat and set it sideways on his head. "I'll do my best." "I don't doubt it at all," said the Doubtful Dromedary, to everyone's surprise. "Three cheers for the Emperor! Long live the Emperor of the Silver Island!" rumbled the Cowardly Lion, and everybody from Oz, even the Camel and Dromedary, fell upon their knees before Happy Toko. "You may have my bride, too, Tappy," chuckled the Scarecrow with a wink at Dorothy. "And Tappy," he added, sobering suddenly, "will you have my grandsons brought up like real children? Just as soon as I return, I shall send them all the books of Oz." Happy bowed, too confused and excited for speech. "Now," said the Scarecrow, seizing Dorothy's hand, "I can return to Oz with an easy mind." "Doubt that," said the Doubtful Dromedary. "You needn't," announced Dorothy. "I've thought it all out." In a few short sentences she outlined her plan. "Bravo!" roared the Cowardly Lion, and now the little party began in real earnest the preparation for the journey back to Oz. First, Happy brought them a delicious luncheon, with plenty of twigs and hay for the Camel and Dromedary, and meat for the Cowardly Lion. The Scarecrow packed into the Camel's sacks a few little souvenirs for the people of Oz. Then they dressed Happy Toko in the Scarecrow's most splendid robe and ordered him to sit upon the throne. Next, the Scarecrow rang for one of the palace servants and ordered the people of the Silver Islands to assemble in the hall. Presently the Silvermen began to come trooping in, packing the great throne room until it could hold no more. Everyone was chattering excitedly. It was quite a different company that greeted them. The Scarecrow, cheerful and witty in his old Munchkin suit, Dorothy and Sir Hokus smiling happily, and the three animal members of the party fairly blinking with contentment. "This," said the Scarecrow pleasantly when everyone was quiet, "is your new Emperor, to whom I ask you to pledge allegiance." He waved proudly in the direction of Happy Toko, who, to tell the truth, presented a truly royal appearance. "It is not possible for me to remain with you, but I shall always watch over this delightful island, and with the magic fan vanquish all its enemies and punish all offenders." Happy Toko bowed to his subjects. The Silver Islanders exchanged startled glances. Then, as the Scarecrow carelessly lifted the fan, they fell prostrate to the earth. "Ah," said the Scarecrow with a broad wink at Happy, "this is delightful. You agree with me, I see. Now then, 3 cheers for Tappy Oko, Imperial Emperor of the Silver Island." The cheers were given with a will, and Happy, in acknowledgment, made a speech that has since been written into the Royal Book of State as a masterpiece of eloquence. Having arranged affairs so satisfactorily, the Scarecrow embraced Happy Toko with deep emotion. Dorothy and Sir Hokus shook hands with him and wished him every success and happiness. Then the little party from Oz walked deliberately to the bean pole in the center of the hall. The Silver Islanders were still a bit dazed by the turn affairs had taken, and stared in astonishment as the Scarecrow and Sir Hokus fashioned thick ropes around the Cowardly Lion, the Doubtful Dromedary, and the Comfortable Camel. Similar ropes they tied around their own waists and Dorothy's, and the ends of all were fastened securely to the handle of the magic parasol, which Dorothy held carefully. "Goodbye, everybody," called the little girl, suddenly opening the parasol. "Goodbye," cried the genial Scarecrow, waving his hand. Too stupefied for speech, the assemblage gaped with amazement as the party floated gently upward. Up, up, and out of sight whirled the entire party. End of chapter 21. Chapter 22 of the Royal Book of Oz by Ruth Plumly Thompson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 22. The Flight of the Parasol. Holding the handle of the parasol, Dorothy steered it with all the skill of an aviator, and in several minutes after their start the party had entered the deep black passage down which the Scarecrow had fallen. Each one of the adventurers was fastened to the parasol with ropes of different lengths, so that none of them bumped together. But even with all the care in the world, it was not possible to keep them from bumping the sides of the tube. The Comfortable Camel grunted plaintively from time to time, and Dorothy could hear the Doubtful Dromedary complaining bitterly in the darkness. It was pitch dark, but by keeping one hand in touch with the bean pole, Dorothy managed to hold the parasol in the center. "How long will it take?" she called breathlessly to the Scarecrow, who was dangling just below. "Hours!" wheezed the Scarecrow, holding fast to his hat. "I hope none of the parties on this line hear us," he added nervously, thinking of the middlings. "What reeks it?" blustered Sir Hokus. "Hast forgotten my trusty sword?" But his words were completely drowned in the rattle of his armor. "Hush!" warned the Scarecrow, "or we'll be pulled in." So for almost an hour they flew up the dark chimney-like tube, with only an occasional groan as one or another scraped against the rough sides of the passage. Then, before they knew what was happening, the parasol crashed into something, half closed, and the whole party started to fall head over heels over helmets. "Oh!" gasped Dorothy, turning a complete somersault. Catch hold of the beanpole, somebody." "Put up the parasol!" shrieked the Scarecrow. Just then Dorothy, finding herself right side up, grasped the pole herself and snapped the parasol wide open. Up, up, up they soared again, faster than ever. "We're flying up much faster than I fell down. We must be at the top," called the Scarecrow hoarsely, "and somebody has closed the opening." End of chapter 22. Chapter 23 of the Royal Book of Oz by Ruth Plumly Thompson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 23. Safe at Last in the Land of Oz. "Must we keep bumping until we bump through?" panted Dorothy anxiously.
"No, by my hilt!"
roared Sir Hokus, and setting his foot in a notch of the beanstalk, he cut with his sword the rope that bound him to the parasol.
"Put the parasol down halfway, and I'll climb ahead and cut an opening."
With great difficulty Dorothy partially lowered the parasol, and instantly their speed diminished. Indeed, they barely moved at all, and the knight had soon passed them on his climb to the top.
"Are you there?"
rumbled the Cowardly Lion anxiously. A great clod of earth landed on his head, filling his eyes and mouth with mud.
"Urgh!"
roared the Lion. "It's getting light! It's getting light!" screamed Dorothy, and in her excitement snapped the parasol up. Sir Hokus, having cut with his sword a large circular hole in the thin crust of earth covering the tube, was about to step out when the parasol, hurling up from below, caught him neatly on its top, and out burst the whole party and sailed up almost to the clouds. "Welcome to Oz!" cried Dorothy, looking down happily on the dear familiar Munchkin landscape. "Home at last!" exulted the Scarecrow, wafting a kiss downward.
"Let's get down to earth before we knock the sun into a cocked hat," gasped the Cowardly Lion, for Dorothy in her excitement had forgotten to lower the parasol. Now the little girl lowered the parasol carefully at first, then faster and faster, and finally shut it altogether. Sir Hokus took a high dive from the top. Down tumbled the others over and over. But fortunately for all, there was a great haystack below, and upon this they landed in a jumbled heap close to the magic beanpole. As it happened, there was no one in sight. Up they jumped in a trice, and while the Comfortable Camel and Doubtful Dromedary munched contentedly at the hay, Sir Hokus and the Scarecrow placed some loose boards over the opening around the beanpole, and covered them with dirt and cornstalks. "I will get Ozma to close it properly with the magic belt," said the Scarecrow gravely. "It wouldn't do to have people sliding down my family tree and scaring poor Tappy. As for me, I shall never leave Oz again." "I hope not,"
growled the Cowardly Lion, tenderly examining his scratched hide. "But if you hadn't, I'd never have had such lovely adventures, or found Sir Hokus and the Comfortable Camel and Doubtful Dromedary," said Dorothy. "And what a lot I have to tell Ozma! Let's go straight to the Emerald City." "It's quite a journey," explained the Scarecrow to Sir Hokus, who was cleaning off his armor with a handful of straw. "I go where Lady Dot goes," replied the knight, smiling affectionately at the little girl, and straightening the ragged hair ribbon which he still wore on his arm. "Don't forget me, dear Karwan Bashi," wheezed the Comfortable Camel, putting his head on the knight's shoulder. "You're a sentimental dunce, Cammy. I doubt whether they'll take us at all." The Doubtful Dromedary looked wistfully at Dorothy. "Go to now!" cried Sir Hokus, putting an arm around each neck. "You're just like two of the family." It will be very comfortable to go to now," sighed the Camel. "We're a big, jolly family here," said the Scarecrow, smiling brightly, "and Oz is the friendliest country in the world." "Right," said the Cowardly Lion, "but let's get started." He stretched his tired muscles and began limping stiffly toward the yellow brick road. "Wait!" cried Dorothy. "Have you forgotten the parasol?"
I wish I could, groaned the Cowardly Lion, rolling his eyes.
Sir Hokus, with folded arms, was gazing regretfully at the beanpole.
"It has been a brave quest,"
He sighed.
"but now I take it our adventures are over."
Absently the Knight felt in his boot top, and, drawing out a small red bean, popped it into his mouth. Just before reaching the top of the tube, he had pulled a handful of them from the beanstalk, but the others had fallen out when he dove into the hay.
"Shall we use the parasol again, Lady Dot?"
he asked, still staring pensively at the beanpole.
"Shall—"
He got no farther, nor did Dorothy answer his question. Instead, she gave a loud scream and clutched the Scarecrow's arm. The Scarecrow, taken by surprise, fell over backward, and the Comfortable Camel, raising his head inquiringly, gave a bellow of terror. From the Knight's shoulder a green branch had sprung, and while the company gazed in round-eyed amazement, it stretched toward the beanpole, attached itself firmly, and then shot straight up into the air, the Knight kicking and struggling on the end. In another second he was out of sight.
"Come back! Come back!"
screamed the Comfortable Camel, running around distractedly. "I doubt we'll ever see him again," groaned the Doubtful Dromedary, craning his neck upward. "Do something! Do something!" begged Dorothy, at which the Scarecrow jumped up and dashed toward the little farmhouse. "I'll get an axe," he called over his shoulder, "and chop down the beanpole."
"No, don't do that!"
roared the Cowardly Lion, staring after him.
"Do you want to break him to pieces?"
Oh, can't you think of something else?" cried Dorothy. "And hurry, or he'll be up to the moon." The Scarecrow put both hands to his head and stared around wildly. Then, with a triumphant wave of his hat, declared himself ready to act. "The parasol!" cried the late Emperor of Silver Island. "Quick, Dorothy, put up the parasol!" Snatching the parasol which lay at the foot of the beanpole, Dorothy snapped it open, and the Scarecrow just had time to make a flying leap and seize the handle before it soared upward, and in a trice they, too, had disappeared.
"Dowdy, Dowdy!"
wailed the Comfortable Camel, crowding up to his hump-backed friend.
"We're having a pack of trouble. My knees are all a-tremble."
"Now, don't you worry," advised the Cowardly Lion, sitting down resignedly. "I'm frightened myself, but that's because I'm so cowardly. Queer things happen in Oz, but they usually turn out all right. Why, Hokus is just growing up with the country, that's all, just growing up with the country." "Doubt that," sniffed the Doubtful Dromedary faintly. "He was grown up in the beginning."
"But think of the Scarecrow's brains. You leave things to the Scarecrow."
But it was no use. Both beasts began to roar dismally.
"I don't want a plant. I want my Karwan Bashi,"
sobbed the Comfortable Camel broken-heartedly.
"Well, don't drown me,"
begged the Cowardly Lion, moving out of the way of the Camel's tears.
"Say, what's that draft?"
What indeed? In the trees overhead, a very cyclone whistled, and before the three had even time to catch their breaths, they were blown high into the air, and the next instant were hurling toward the Emerald City like three furry cannonballs, faster and faster. End of chapter 23. Chapter 24 of the Royal Book of Oz by Ruth Plumly Thompson. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 24. Homeward Bound to the Emerald City. Dorothy and the Scarecrow, clinging fast to the magic parasol, had followed the Knight almost to the clouds. At first it looked as if they would never catch up with him, so swiftly was the branch growing. But it was not long before the little umbrella began to gain, and in several minutes more they were beside Sir Hokus himself. "Beshrew me now!" gasped the Knight, stretching out his hand toward Dorothy. "Canst stop this reckless plant?" "Give me your sword," commanded the Scarecrow. "I'll cut you off." Dorothy, with great difficulty, kept the parasol close to the Knight while the Scarecrow reached for the sword. But Sir Hokus backed away in alarm. "'Tis part of me, and you cut it off, I will be cut off too. 'Tis rooted in my back," he puffed. "What shall we do?" cried Dorothy in distress. "Maybe if we take hold of his hands we can keep him from going any higher." The Scarecrow, jamming down his hat so it wouldn't blow off, nodded approvingly, and each holding the parasol with one hand gave the other to the Knight. And when Dorothy pointed the parasol down, to her great delight Sir Hokus came along, the thin green branch growing just about as fast as they moved. Just then the little fan, which had been rolling around merrily in Dorothy's pocket, slipped out and fell straight down toward the three unsuspecting beasts below. Draught, no wonder! But Dorothy never missed it, and, quite unconscious of such a calamity, anxiously talked over the Knight's predicament with the Scarecrow. They both decided that the best plan was to fly straight to the Emerald City and have Ozma release the Knight from the enchanted beanstalk. "I'm sorry you got tangled up in my family tree, old fellow," said the Scarecrow after they had flown some time in silence. "But this makes us relations, doesn't it?" He winked broadly at the Knight. "So it does," said Sir Hokus jovially. "I am a branch of your family now. Yet methinks I should not have swallowed that bean." "Bean?" questioned Dorothy. "What bean?" The Knight carefully explained how he had plucked a handful of red beans from the beanstalk just before reaching the top of the tube, and how he had eaten one. "So that's what started you growing!" exclaimed Dorothy in surprise. "Alas, yes," admitted the Knight. "I've never felt more grown up in my life," he finished solemnly. "An adventurous country, this Oz." "I should say it was," chuckled the Scarecrow. "But isn't it almost time we were reaching the Emerald City, Dorothy?" "I think I'm going in the right direction," answered the little girl, "but I'll fly a little lower to be sure." "Not too fast, not too fast," warned Sir Hokus, looking nervously over his shoulder at his long, wriggling stem. "There's Ozma's palace!" cried the Scarecrow all at once. "And there's Ozma!" screamed Dorothy, peering down delightedly. "And Scraps and Tik-Tok and everybody!" She pointed the parasol straight down, when a sharp tug from Sir Hokus jerked them all back. They were going faster than the poor Knight was growing, so Dorothy lowered the parasol halfway, and slowly they floated toward the earth, landing gently in one of the flower beds of Ozma's lovely garden. "Come along and meet the folks," said the Scarecrow as Dorothy closed the parasol. But Sir Hokus clutched him in alarm. "Hold, hold!" gasped the Knight. "I've stopped growing, but if you leave me I'll shoot up into the air again." The Scarecrow and Dorothy looked at each other in dismay. Sure enough, the Knight had stopped growing, and it was all they could do to hold him down to earth, for the stubborn branch of beanstalk was trying to straighten up. They had fallen quite a distance from the palace itself, and all the people of Oz had their backs turned, so had not seen their singular arrival. "Hello!" called the Scarecrow loudly. Then,
Help! Help!"
as the knight jerked him twice into the air. But Ozma, Trot, Jack Pumpkinhead, and all the rest were staring upward and talking so busily among themselves that they did not hear either Dorothy's or the Scarecrow's cries. First one, then the other was snatched off his feet, and although Sir Hokus, with tears in his eyes, begged them to leave him to his fate, they held on with all their might. Just as it looked as if they all three would fly into the air again, the little Wizard of Oz happened to turn around. "Look! Look!" he cried, tugging Ozma's sleeve. "Why, it's Dorothy!" gasped Ozma, rubbing her eyes. "It's Dorothy and—"
"Help! Help!"
screamed the Scarecrow, waving one arm wildly. Without waiting another second, all the celebrities of Oz came running toward the three adventurers. "Somebody heavy come take hold!" puffed Dorothy, out of breath with her efforts to keep Sir Hokus on the ground. The Ozites, seeing that help was needed at once, suppressed their curiosity. "I'm heavy," said Tik-Tok solemnly, clasping the knight's arm. The Tin Woodman seized his other hand, and Dorothy sank down exhausted on the grass. Princess Ozma pressed forward. "What does it all mean? Where did you come from?" asked the little Queen of Oz, staring in amazement at the strange spectacle before her.
"And who is this medieval person?" asked Professor Wogglebug, pushing forward importantly. He had returned to the palace to collect more data for the Royal Book of Oz.
He doesn't look evil to me,"
giggled Scraps, dancing up to Sir Hokus, her suspender button eyes snapping with fun. "He isn't," said Dorothy indignantly, for Sir Hokus was too shaken about to answer. "He's my knight-errant."
"Ah, I see," replied Professor Wogglebug. "A case of when knighthood was in flower."
And would you believe it? The beanstalk at that minute burst into a perfect shower of red blossoms that came tumbling down over everyone. Before they had recovered from their surprise, the branch snapped off close to the knight's armor, and Tik-Tok, the Tin Woodman, and Sir Hokus rolled over in a heap. The branch itself whistled through the air and disappeared. "Oh!" cried Dorothy, hugging the knight impulsively. "I'm so glad!" "Are you all right?" asked the Scarecrow anxiously.
"Good as ever,"
announced Sir Hokus, and indeed all traces of the magic stalk had disappeared from his shoulders. "Dorothy," cried Ozma again, "what does it all mean?" "Merely that I slid down my family tree and that Dorothy and this knight rescued me," said the Scarecrow calmly. "And he's a real royalty, so there!" cried Dorothy with a wave at the Scarecrow and making a little face at Professor Wogglebug. "Meet His Supreme Highness Chang Wang Woe of Silver Island, who had abdicated his throne and returned to be a plain Scarecrow in Oz." Then, as the eminent educator of Oz stood gaping at the Scarecrow, "Oh, Ozma, I've so much to tell you." "Begin, begin!" cried the little Wizard, "for everything's mighty mysterious. First, the Cowardly Lion and two unknown beasts shoot through the air and stop just outside the third-story windows, and there they hang, although I've tried all my magic to get them down. Then you and the Scarecrow drop in with a strange knight." "Oh, the poor Cowardly Lion!" gasped Dorothy as the Wizard finished speaking. "The magic fan!" She felt hurriedly in her pocket. "It's gone!" "It must have slipped out of your pocket and blown them here, and they'll never come down till that fan is closed," cried the Scarecrow in an agitated voice. All of this was Greek to Ozma and the others, but when Dorothy begged the little Queen to send for her magic belt, she did it without question. This belt Dorothy had captured from the Gnome King, and it enabled the wearer to wish people and objects wherever one wanted them.
I wish the magic fan to close and to come safely back to me," said Dorothy as soon as she had clasped the belt around her waist. No sooner were the words out before there was a loud crash and a series of roars and groans. Everybody started on a run for the palace, Sir Hokus ahead of all the rest. The fan had mysteriously returned to Dorothy's pocket. The three animals had fallen into a huge cluster of rose bushes, and, though badly scratched and frightened, were really unhurt. "I doubt that I'll like Oz," quavered the Doubtful Dromedary, lurching toward Sir Hokus.
You might have been more careful with that
"Fan," growled the Cowardly Lion reproachfully, plucking thorns from his hide. The Comfortable Camel was so overjoyed to see the knight that he rested his head on Sir Hokus's shoulder and began weeping down his armor. And now that their adventures seemed really over, what explanations were to be made? Sitting on the top step of the palace with all of them around her, Dorothy told the whole wonderful story of the Scarecrow's family tree. When her breath gave out, the Scarecrow took up the tale himself, and as they all realized how nearly they had lost their jolly comrade, many of the party shed real tears. Indeed, Nick Chopper hugged the Scarecrow till there was not a whole straw in his body. "Never leave us again," begged Ozma, and the Scarecrow, crossing Nick Chopper's heart (he had none of his own), promised that he never would. And what a welcome they gave Sir Hokus, the Doubtful Dromedary, and the Comfortable Camel! Only Professor Wogglebug seemed disturbed. During the strange recital he had grown quieter and quieter, and finally, with an embarrassed cough, had excused himself and hurried into the palace. He went directly to the study, and seating himself at a desk, opened a large book, none other than the Royal Book of Oz. Dipping an emerald pen in the ink, he began a new chapter headed thus: His Imperial Majesty the Scarecrow, late Emperor and Imperial Sovereign of Silver Island. Then, flipping over several pages to a chapter headed Princess Dorothy, he wrote carefully at the end, Dorothy, Princess and Royal Discoverer of Oz. Meanwhile, below stairs, the Scarecrow was distributing his gifts. There were silver chains for everyone in the palace, and shining silver slippers for Ozma, Betsy Bobbin, Trot, and Dorothy, and a bottle of silver polish for Nick Chopper. Dorothy presented Ozma with the magic fan and parasol, and they were safely put away by Jellia Jam with the other magic treasures of Oz. Next, because they were all curious to see the Scarecrow's wonderful kingdom, they hurried upstairs to look at the magic picture. "Show us the Emperor of Silver Island," commanded Ozma. Immediately, the beautiful silver throne room appeared. Happy Toko had removed his imperial hat and was standing on his head, to the great delight of the whole court, and a host of little Silver Islander boys were peeking in at the windows. "Now, doesn't that look cheerful?" asked the Scarecrow delightedly. "I knew he'd make a good emperor." "I wish we could hear what he's saying," said Dorothy. "Oh, do look at Choo Choo!" The Grand Choo Choo was standing beside the throne, scowling horribly. "I think I can arrange for you to hear," muttered the Wizard of Oz, and taking a queer magic instrument from his pocket, he whispered, "Ow, Bio Boy." Instantly they heard the jolly voice of Happy Toko singing, "Oh, shine his shoes of silver and brush his silver queue, for I am but an emperor and he's the Grand Choo Choo." Ozma laughed heartily as the picture faded away, and so did the others. Indeed, there was so much to ask and wonder about that it seemed as if they never would finish talking. "Let's have a party, an old-fashioned Oz party," proposed Ozma, when the excitement had calmed down a bit. And an old-fashioned party it was, with places for everybody
and a special table for the Cowardly Lion, the Hungry Tiger, Toto, the Glass Cat, the Comfortable Camel, the Doubtful Dromedary, and all the other dear creatures of that amazing kingdom. Sir Hokus insisted on stirring up a huge pasty for the occasion, and there were songs, speeches, and cheers for everyone, not forgetting the Doubtful Dromedary. At the cheering, he rose with an embarrassed jerk of his long neck. "In my left-hand saddle-sack," he said gruffly, "there's a quantity of silken shawls and jewels. I doubt whether they are good enough, but I would like Dorothy and Queen Ozma to have them." "Hear, hear!" cried the Scarecrow, pounding on the table with his knife. Then everything grew quiet as Ozma told how she, with the help of Glinda, the good sorceress, had stopped the war between the Horners and Hoppers. When she had finished, Sir Hokus sprang up impulsively. "I prithee, lovely lady, never trouble your royal head about wars again. From now on I will do battle for you and little Dorothy and Oz, and I will be your good knight every day." At this the applause was tremendous. "Ye good Knight of Oz, full of courage and vim, will do battle for us, we'll take care of him," shouted Scraps, who was becoming more excited every minute. "I'll lend you some of my polish for your armor, old fellow," said Nick Chopper, as the Knight sat down, beaming with pleasure. "Well," said Ozma with a smile, when everyone had feasted and talked to heart's content, "is everybody happy?" "I am!" cried the Comfortable Camel, "for here I am perfectly comfortable." "I am!" cried Dorothy, putting her arm around the Scarecrow who sat next to her, "for I have found my old friend and made some new ones." "I'm happy!" cried the Scarecrow, waving his glass, "because there is no age in Oz, and I am still my old Ozish self." "As for me," said the Knight, "I am happy, for I have served a lady, gone on a quest, and slain a dragon. Ozma and Oz forever." End of Chapter 24. End of The Royal Book of Oz by Ruth Plumly Thompson. This book recorded by Phil Chenevert in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, February 2017. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for listening.